The Associated Press calls Christians white supremacists. President Trump announces more top White House picks. And grandparents are moving en masse to their kids' yuppie neighborhoods in southern suburbs to raise their grandkids, which is kind of nice, but kind of weird. And in any case, no one wants to acknowledge the problem that is causing it. I'm Michael Knowles. This is The Michael Knowles Show. Welcome back to the show. Mike Tyson, Jake Paul. I have so many thoughts about this fight. Everybody has a lot of thoughts about this fight, but I've been thinking about this fight all weekend, and I will tell you what I think about it. First, I want to tell you about First Liberty Institute. Go to supremecoup.com/Knowles. There is a looming threat to our constitutional republic that the mainstream media won't cover. The radical left is plotting a Supreme Court coup. They're not even trying to hide it. These progressive ideologues want to eliminate the court's conservative majority by packing it with their own hand-picked justices. It's not court reform. It's a blatant power grab to get the outcomes they want. The scary part is, if one party controls the House, Senate, and presidency, come January, they could restructure the court overnight. With a simple majority vote and a president's signature, their plan becomes reality. We've already seen their playbook. Made-up ethical attacks on justices, illegal protests at their homes, and open threats from so-called representatives. It is Venezuela-style court packing. It would spell the end of judicial independence and the rule of law as we know it. But there is hope. First Liberty is leading the charge to protect the Supreme Court from this radical plan. They are fighting to preserve the legitimacy of the court and the separation of powers that safeguards our freedoms. Do not let them Venezuela your United States. Go to supremecoup.com/Knowles, K-N-O-W-L-E-S. That is supremecoup.com/Knowles to learn how you can help stop the left's takeover of the Supreme Court. The future of our country is in your hands. Check out supremecoup.com/Knowles today. Before we get to any of that, the Associated Press. Every time you think the Associated Press can't fall even lower into degradation and dishonesty, they prove you wrong. The Associated Press is now claiming, in a supposedly unbiased news report, just telling you the facts, that Pete Hegseth's tattoo of a 1,000-year Christian motto is, quote, white supremacist. Washington, Associated Press. Pete Hegseth, the Army National Guard veteran and Fox News host nominated by Donald Trump to lead the Department of Defense, was flagged as a possible insider threat by a fellow service member due to a tattoo on his bicep that is associated with white supremacist groups. What is the tattoo? The AP goes on to tell you. This week, a fellow Guard member who was the unit security manager and on an anti-terrorism team at the time shared with the Associated Press an email he sent to the unit's leadership flagging a different tattoo reading Deus Vult that has been used by white supremacists, concerned it was an indication of an insider threat. Okay. There are a couple of layers to this stupid story. The first one is the tattoo itself, Deus Vult. What is Deus Vult? Is it a white supremacist slogan? No. Deus Vult was the cry of the audience at the sermon by Pope Urban II at the Council of Clermont when Pope Urban II responded to the Byzantine Emperor Alexius's plea for assistance because Eastern Christians were being massacred by Seljuk Muslim Turks. That's what it was. The Byzantine Emperor wrote to the Pope, even though there was a little trouble, between the East and the West, and he said, hey, we're being overrun by lunatic Seljuk Muslim Turks who have conquered so many of our lands and are murdering our people. Please help us. And the Pope gave a sermon at the Council of Clermont following the Council of Piacenza and said, hey, we're going to go help out our Eastern Christian brothers. And the audience there responded, Deus Vult, God wills it. Probably they responded in more of a medieval French and said something like Dieu le veut, but for simplicity, if you can call it simplicity, we now think of that as Deus Vult in the Latin. God wills it. That's all it means. This has been a motto of Christians for 1,000 years. The Associated Press, based on nothing, is saying that this is somehow a white supremacist slogan. Has nothing to... Pete has other tattoos too. Pete has a Jerusalem cross. Are we going to be told the Jerusalem cross is a white supremacist slogan? Pete has a tattoo that says "We the People" on his forearm. Are we going to be told that that's a white supremacist slogan? Probably we will. That is what the libs think. But very, very offensive to Christians that a 1,000-year-old Christian motto that says nothing more than God wills it, specifically God wills Christians helping other Christians not be slaughtered by lunatic Muslims in the East, that is somehow unacceptable or immoral or white supremacist. Completely stupid. But then you get to the story itself. What is the story? The AP isn't supposed to be writing opinion columns. It's my opinion that this slogan is actually a white supremacist dog whistle. So what the AP has to do is cloak its opinion column, cloak its propaganda for the Democrats in the facade of a news story. And what's the news story here? Some ignorant jerk who worked with Pete Hegseth in the National Guard didn't know what a Latin phrase meant. That's the news story. Some random jerk in the National Guard who knew Pete Hegseth was illiterate and ignorant and mistook a traditional Christian slogan for some white supremacist thing and sent an email. And he sent an email, and then his superiors, who were presumably better educated and smarter than he was, ignored the email. Rightly so. That's the whole news story. But somehow this is supposed to be groundbreaking news. Stop the presses. Some ignorant jerk didn't understand a Christian slogan. So we, the Associated Press, are going to side with him in ignorance and pretend that Pete Hegseth is a white supremacist because he's a Christian. That's it. That's the whole story. These people. You cannot have a low enough opinion of these people, especially the Associated Press. I've made the point that the next White House press secretary should seriously consider removing the seat of the New York Times in the daily press briefing. And the New York Times has also made some egregious fact-checking reporting errors, which we'll get to momentarily. But in many ways, the Associated Press is worse than the New York Times. The Associated Press, which sets the style for so much journalism. The Associated Press has gone all in on trans ideology. The Associated Press is going all in on anti-Christian propaganda. The Associated Press is absolutely awful. Now, speaking of the White House press secretary, President Trump has selected his first White House press secretary, and that is Karoline Leavitt. Karoline Leavitt was the front runner in the race for press secretary for those who were betting men, those who were trying to figure out the odds. Karoline Leavitt was the national spokesman for the Trump campaign, but there's a lot more to her than that. Karoline Leavitt is the youngest press secretary in American history, White House press secretary. She's only 27 years old, but don't let that fool you. Don't let that lead you to think that she's some lightweight or something. Karoline Leavitt has a Catholic education, might have been homeschooled for part of her education. Karoline Leavitt is already a mother at age 27. That's great. Used to be very common. These days it's rare. That's really great. Karoline Leavitt also ran for Congress herself. And she didn't win the seat. A Democrat won the seat, but she did win a primary unexpectedly. She fought a very good campaign. And I was speaking to Roger Stone on Thursday or Friday, and Roger made the point. He said, look, I think the job for press sec is Karoline's to turn down. I think she's earned the job with her work on the campaign. And he said, I like that she ran for office herself. I like that she has exposed herself to attacks from the left, which you can do it in all sorts of ways. You can do it in the media. You can do it, but especially if you're running for office, that brings you through a certain kind of fire that leaves you vetted. So I think that's a big plus for her. And then obviously she was the national spokesman for the Trump campaign, which was very successful, one of the most successful campaigns in recent history. So all around, I think a really phenomenal pick, obviously very qualified for it. And then you have to consider her selection in conjunction with Trump's pick for his communications director, Stephen Chung. Stephen Chung was the rapid response director on the Trump 2016 campaign. So he's been with Trump for a long time. He was with Trump in the White House, assistant communications director in the White House. He was with him on the 2020 campaign. He was with him on the 2024 campaign. And the 2024 campaign, indisputably, incontrovertibly, won. So even beyond these two individuals who are eminently qualified for their positions, what I like about this is it's a vote of confidence in the team. Okay, you hear a lot about how Trump demands loyalty from his people. Well, here Trump is demonstrating his mutual loyalty to his people by saying, look, I'm going to dance with the gal that brung me. Okay, this campaign team worked very well. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. This is also, I think, a vote of confidence in the administration because this is a young administration. For all we hear about how these were elderly candidates back when it was Biden and Trump, the average age of Trump's picks is more than a dozen years below the average age of Biden's first cabinet. Okay, Trump is clearly trying to pass the baton to a new generation of leadership. And this new generation of leadership has some notable characteristics. One, it's young. Two, it's conservative. It's really not all that squishy. These are much more coherent, consistent conservatives than you see in other Republican institutions. And three, I noticed this perhaps because I'm one myself, it is notably Catholic. There is a disproportionate Catholic influence here, which I think is a good thing. Alexis de Tocqueville predicted this in Democracy in America, in a little red passage of the second part of Democracy in America, where he said, America is a Protestant country. It's got a kind of weird religious culture. It's all sorts of varied. There's religious toleration. But as America develops, he predicted that America would become more Catholic on the one hand and more atheist on the other hand. So people were going to diverge. Some were going to go way trad, Deus Vult, go all the way to Rome, and some were going to give up Christianity altogether. And that was an audacious prediction in the 19th century, and it seems to be coming true. The Catholics have had a disproportionate influence on the conservative movement for a long time. Bill Buckley, Russell Kirk, even Frank Meyer, Phyllis Schlafly, the list goes on and on. Pat Buchanan, again, we could be here all day listing the prominent Catholics, but this is really seeping into the administration here. And so I think that's a great thing. I think there's a deep wellspring of conservatism here, and I think there's a lot of energy around these young picks. So all in all, really good. Now, Trump has picked some other picks as well. We'll get to that in a moment. First, though, I want to tell you about Good Ranchers. Go to goodranchers.com, use code Knowles. Thanksgiving, it's one of my favorite holidays, but let me tell you, I hate fighting through crowded grocery stores filled with mystery meat from who knows where, probably processed with all sorts of chemicals. That's why I trust Good Ranchers. You should too. Good Ranchers delivers 100% American meat right to your door. No antibiotics, no hormones, definitely no seed oils, just pure steakhouse quality cuts from American farmers who share your values. The quality is absolutely off the chain. The other night, Elisa made some soup. It was like a beef kind of stock with meatballs, whatever. And I was eating. I said, this is especially good. She does meatball soups a lot. I said, this is especially good right now. What is it? What's the deal? And she said, oh, well, I used the beef patties from Good Ranchers. I had run out of meatball beef, so I just used the beef patties. And the difference was so noticeable, you could notice it in soup. Okay, that's how good this beef is. Go to goodranchers.com, use code Knowles, K-N-O-W-L-E-S, to claim your free Thanksgiving ham. Do not wait. Just like the supply of conservative voters in California, these hams won't last forever. Goodranchers.com, American meat delivered. Trump has named his energy secretary, and that is going to be, drumroll please, a fossil fuel executive. Love that. This is Chris Wright. I don't know very much about Chris Wright. He's not a huge public figure on the right, but what we do know about him is that he is the CEO of Denver-based Liberty Energy. He is a vociferous proponent of oil and natural gas development, including fracking. This is good stuff. Trump tipped his hat. He showed his hand a little bit that he was going to pick someone like this when he said on the campaign trail, we love Bobby Kennedy. We're going to unleash Bobby on health and human services. We're going to unleash him on big pharma, but we're not going to let him get near energy. No, we want to drill, baby, drill. So we had a feeling this was going to happen, but it's good. It's good. It's a kind of a team of rivals. Not quite, though. When that phrase is applied to Lincoln, it refers to Lincoln bringing in some of his political enemies into his own administration. Here, everyone really loves Trump, but they do have some rivalries with each other. You've got free traders on the one hand, you've got protectionists on the other, both in Trump's administration. You have people who want to ban fast food, basically, and you have people who, including Trump himself, who love just downing McDonald's all the time. You've got people who want to promote electric cars, one person in particular. You've got people who don't care about electric cars and want to go all the way in on fossil fuels. So that is going to create some tension in the Trump administration. What Trump has tried to do, I think, is put people where their strengths are. So in the fight between, for instance, the free traders and the protectionists, he's putting the protectionists, it would appear, in charge of economic policy, but he's putting the free traders in charge of government deregulation. So those two can actually work together pretty well, cut down the administrative state, cut down bureaucratic bloat. The free traders love that kind of thing. But in terms of actual trade policy, you're going to put the protectionists and you might have a coherent administration. But in any case, there are going to be a lot of internal administration fights. There's no question about that. Now, we get to the most controversial pick that Trump has made so far. That is Matt Gaetz, because On Friday, there was supposed to be a House ethics report released on Matt Gaetz. But the report was not released. And the report was not released because some of it leaked, it seems. But the report was not released because Matt Gaetz is no longer a member of the House of Representatives. Because he was nominated for AG on Wednesday and he immediately resigned Congress. Which was a little bit of 5D chess here because not only did the nomination for AG roil all of Washington, but it also meant that the Democrats in the House had no excuse to release the ethics report other than just appearing to want to torpedo one of Trump's big picks. But you're still going to hear a lot about it. It's going to leak. The Senate is going to request it. It's going to get out there. There's no stopping it. However, the one thing that you have to remember when you hear anything from the House, and now I sound like Mike Tyson, the House Ethics Committee report on Matt Gaetz's supposed scandals, sex scandals, is the Department of Justice investigated and cleared him of wrongdoing. The Joe Biden crooked far-left Department of Justice investigated the allegations against Matt Gaetz. The allegations are that he slept with an underage girl and he went to all sorts of crazy parties and did all sorts of degenerate stuff. Those are the allegations. That's what you're going to hear in the ethics report. However, I'm not saying he didn't do any of these things. I'm not saying he's lived a totally clean life. But you do have to ask yourself, hold on. If all of this is true, then why didn't the DOJ pursue charges against him? The DOJ has been locking up President Trump's political enemies. The DOJ has been showing up to pro-lifers' homes and knocking down their doors and arresting them in front of their 7 kids. The DOJ has been trying to imprison Trump himself, has been spying on Catholic parishes, calling them radical traditionalists akin to terrorists. Why would the DOJ have cleared Matt Gaetz here? They hate Matt Gaetz. It raises a lot of questions about that. So it also makes you want to take with a grain of salt this House Ethics Committee report whenever it does release. What is the point of the Gaetz nomination? I've heard some Republicans say, I really hate the Gaetz nomination. I get it. It's kind of out there. It's sucking up all the oxygen in the room. I think maybe that's what it's about, though, because the minute that we started talking about the Matt Gaetz nomination, we kind of stopped talking about Pete Hegseth. The AP is trying to revive the story now. We kind of stopped talking about Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence. We kind of stopped talking about Bobby Kennedy at HHS. It seems to be kind of the distraction. And so from a political perspective, it seems to be doing its job. And furthermore, I'm not suggesting that Trump doesn't really want Matt Gaetz to be the AG. I think he does. But why? Matt Gaetz didn't go to the most prestigious law school. Matt Gaetz didn't clerk for the Supreme Court. Matt Gaetz is not a federal prosecutor. Why would Matt Gaetz become the Attorney General? Matt Gaetz is being nominated for one reason above all, at the political level, and that is to break up the authority of the current political class. Matt Gaetz is not being nominated for AG despite his lack of a Yale Law School or Harvard Law School degree. He is being nominated because he doesn't have a Yale Law School or Harvard Law School degree. He's being nominated because he's not part of the DOJ ecosystem. He's being nominated because he hasn't been a federal prosecutor. He's being nominated because the DOJ is itself corrupt. People are saying if Matt Gaetz comes in as AG, there are going to be mass resignations in the DOJ. Yeah, right. That's the point. That's the point. Because I don't care how even-minded you are. I don't care how averse you are to populism, how much you like the establishment. No one can argue that the DOJ has not become obscenely corrupt in recent years, going all the way back to the Russia collusion hoax, working with the Democrats and Russian intelligence, ironically, to cook up this fake dossier on Trump, then going in, trying to deceive General Mike Flynn in the early days of the Trump administration so that you could go in and undermine the whole administration that you tried to prevent from coming into office in the first place. That's it. No corrupt DOJ, no Matt Gaetz as Attorney General. If the libs are upset about it, they have no one to blame but themselves. Now, another outrageous attack on a nominee has come from Debbie Wasserman-Schulz, against the aforementioned lovely Tulsi Gabbard. Here's what the former head of the DNC, Debbie Wasserman-Schulz, has to say about Tulsi.
Tulsi Gabbard is someone who has met with war criminals, violated the Department of State's guidance, and secretly, clandestinely went to Syria and met with Assad, who gassed and attacked his own people with chemical weapons. She's considered to be essentially, by most assessments, a Russian asset, and would be the most dangerous.
Is that how you consider her? Is that what you consider her?
Oh, yes. There's no question. I consider her someone who is likely a Russian asset, who would be as the DNI responsible for managing our entire intelligence community, hold all of our most significant intelligence information and secrets, and essentially would be a direct line to our enemies.
She's considered by most assessments to be a Russian asset? What assessments are you looking at, honey? My assessment says she's not a Russian asset. Trump's assessments that she's not. Where does this idea that Tulsi Gabbard, former Democrat candidate for president, former Democrat congressman, who now is a Republican because the Democrats lost their minds, where does that come from, that she's a Russian asset? I'll tell you exactly where it comes from. It comes from Hillary Clinton.
I'm not making any predictions, but I think they've got their eye on somebody who's currently in the Democratic primary and are grooming her to be the third-party candidate. She's the favorite of the Russians. They have a bunch of sites and bots and other ways of supporting her so far.
Now, when asked if Clinton was referring to Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, Democrat of Hawaii, Clinton's spokesman said, quote, "If the nesting doll fits."
If the nesting doll fits. So this was back in 16. Hillary says, I'm sorry, in 2020, Hillary says that Tulsi Gabbard was a Russian asset. What was her evidence for this? That she doesn't want America to just be endlessly bombing the Middle East. That was it. Tulsi, who served in the military, thinks that maybe we need to pull back on the Wilsonian foreign policy just a touch. That's her argument. And the irony, of course, is this whole accusation comes from Hillary Clinton, and Hillary herself, Hillary and the Democrats themselves, colluded with the Russians in 2016 to come up with the Steele dossier that was actual Russian disinformation to try to undermine the Trump campaign. So I just don't want to hear about it. The Democrats who giddily supported the Soviet Union for much of the 20th century, the Democrats, these liberal leftist Democrats for whom the Russians could do no wrong, Hillary Clinton, who wanted to set a reset button with the Russians, Hillary, who then colluded with the Russians to try to undermine Trump, she now wants to say that a perfectly admirable Democrat member of Congress turned Republican advisor is a tool of the Russians. Give me a break. I don't want to hear about it. Somebody with a little bit more credibility needs to make that accusation before I even want to entertain it. Now, speaking of the new administration, one big part of it is making America healthy again. Bobby Kennedy is on a jihad against seed oils, and that's why I'm so pleased to tell you about Seed Oil Scout. Go to seedoilscout.com/Knowles. I'm so excited. I've been a big fan of Seed Oil Scout for at least a year now, probably. And Elisa sort of red-pilled me on the jihad against seed oils. Did you know that up until 1990, McDonald's fries were cooked in traditional beef tallow? It is fascinating how our food culture has shifted away from these natural cooking fats that sustained generations of our ancestors and switched to a bunch of synthetic processed goop. That is why I'm so excited to tell you about Seed Oil Scout, an innovative app that is helping people make informed choices about their dining options. With over 30,000 restaurant reviews across major cities, it helps you locate establishments that cook with traditional fats like butter, tallow, and olive oil. When you're traveling, especially during the holidays, it is challenging to maintain your dietary preferences. Seed Oil Scout makes it simple. I absolutely adore this app. They've got a great one that they helped us find over in Franklin. There's right near Nashville. Probably wouldn't have found it without Seed Oil Scout. Join the movement toward better dining choices. Download Seed Oil Scout for free at seedoilscout.com/Knowles. seedoilscout.com/Knowles. Dine fearlessly. I mentioned earlier the New York Times preposterous fact check against a new member of the Trump administration. Well, this ties in perfectly with Seed Oil Scout. This is Bobby Kennedy. The New York Times, the New York Times and the AP are in a fight to see who can be the most degraded, who can be the most preposterous news organization out there. The New York Times has a fact check on Bobby Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy was spreading misinformation. And I'm just going to read verbatim this fact check. Mr. Kennedy has singled out Fruit Loops as an example of a product with too many artificial ingredients, questioning why the Canadian version has fewer than the US version. But he was wrong. The ingredient list is roughly the same. Although Canada's has natural colorings made from blueberries and carrots, while the US product contains red dye 40, yellow 5, and blue 1, as well as butylated hydroxytoluene, or BHT, a lab-made chemical that is used for freshness according to the ingredient label. Fact check, 25 Pinocchios. I don't even know how to make fun of this. How am I supposed to make fun of this? The New York Times has done all the work for me making fun of themselves. Mr. Kennedy has singled out Fruit Loops as an example of a product with too many artificial ingredients. So put a pause here. There's no way he can be wrong about too many, because too many is a matter that is largely subjective. What is too many? 3 cigars in an evening is too many for some people. It's not too many for me most of the time. What is too many? That's a very subjective kind of phrase. But then you get more to an objective fact claim, questioning why the Canadian version has fewer artificial ingredients than the US version. And the New York Times says he was wrong. The ingredient list is roughly the same, except that Canada's has natural ingredients and the US has many more artificial ingredients. But he was wrong, even though we're going to explain to you why he was completely right. In language that is so precise, it's hilarious. No. The US version doesn't have more artificial ingredients. Well, okay, fine, unless you want to count red dye 40, yellow 5, blue 1, and butylated hydroxytoluene, BHT, which is a lab-made chemical that's a preservative. But other than that, it's exactly the same. These people should not have a seat in the White House briefing room. Okay, it's as though they want to prove my point every day. This is very poor journalism. This is very shoddy work. This is functionally illiterate as far as journalism goes. Mr. Kennedy made a claim and the claim was true and that's why he's wrong. That person doesn't deserve, some random Tumblr blog deserves the New York Times' spot more than the New York Times does. Totally preposterous. Now, in the midst of all of this degradation and embarrassment, Bill Maher, that old liberal he's a little heterodox, okay? He's willing to get the applause of Republicans every now and again. But Bill Maher, when it counts, he defends the Democrats. He's saying, okay, look, the Democrats they've lost a little bit here, but there's a big difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. The Democrats care about democracy. They're willing to accept the results of an election. The Republicans do not.
Which is that when the Democrats lose, the masses overgo in peace. When the Republicans lose, we have a riot. And we pretend that every election is bullshit. This is already something that has passed us to the point where we're not the country we should be or we used to be. What I'm asking is, you know that if Trump had lost this election, right now, we would be talking about the votes that are still coming in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, and he'd be in the courts, and we would just be all in a tizzy.
Okay. Now, I don't know if you guys read the news too much. In fact, if you listen to this show, you probably do. But if you do, you would probably know that Democrats are currently doing exactly that thing in Pennsylvania. Bill Maher says, look, we lost the election and we acknowledge it, okay? We just move on. But if the Republicans lose, there'd be a riot, okay? The Democrats, when we lose Pennsylvania, we're not trying to have recount after recount and make up all sorts of votes and steal the seat from the guy who won, except that's exactly what the Democrats are currently doing right now. Bob Casey, the Democrat incumbent, refuses to concede that election. Dave McCormick, the Republican, has won. Even Chuck Schumer is admitting, implicitly at least, that Dave McCormick has won. He allowed Dave McCormick to show up to the Senate orientation. It's over. But the Democrats won't give it up. And it's not just that the Democrats are saying we need to count every single vote and we need to make sure that this election is done fairly. The Democrats, in trying to steal the seat in Pennsylvania, are admitting that the way they're trying to do it is illegal. So the Supreme Court, Pennsylvania Supreme Court, has ruled that mail-in ballots lacking the formally required signatures or dates cannot be counted in official results. Okay, you get a mail-in ballot to the election office. If there's no signature, if there's no date, that vote doesn't count, per the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. The election officials, who are Democrats in Philadelphia and in the surrounding counties, Bucks, Center, and Montgomery counties, are explicitly ignoring the Supreme Court order. According to Bucks County Commissioner Diane Ellis Marcellia, a big Dem, she says, "I think we all know that precedent by a court doesn't matter anymore in this country. People violate laws anytime they want. So for me, if I violate this law, it's because I want a court to pay attention. There's nothing more important than counting votes." I didn't make up that quote. That's her quote. That's the Democrat official saying, I know that I am violating the law. I know that the Supreme Court has already ruled on this. I am going to violate the law because nothing is more important than counting illegal votes as far as I'm concerned. And I, some random Democrat election official, am more important than the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Screw the law. Screw the Supreme Court. We don't care. I'm going to steal this election if I can. That's the Democrat argument for this. It's not even as though they're doing that behind the scenes and the Democrat argument is, no, actually, there's seriously a question as to whether or not these are legal ballots. It's not. The Democrats are just saying, we're going to try to steal this seat and maybe we'll get away with it. The Democrats are trying to steal the seat in a much more egregious way than Republicans have tried to steal any election in recent memory. Bill Maher either doesn't know that or doesn't really care. Okay, speaking of prominent fights, I have to get to the political issue that is not really all that political, that has been weighing on my mind all weekend. And that is the Mike Tyson-Jake Paul fight. I'm not the biggest boxing fan. I like boxing, but I don't watch every big fight. I had to watch this fight. Everyone tuned in. This was a massive, tens of millions of people watching. What was it, like 60 million viewers or something like that, watching this fight. Mike Tyson, 58 years old. Jake Paul, 27 years old. Before I get into it, I have to ask, for those of you who watched, which is probably many, if not most of you in the audience, do you think the fight was fixed? I bet most people are going to say yes. But then I'm going to ask a question that's going to be more controversial. How was it fixed? I walked in today. I saw Mr. Davies and Professor Jacob. I said, all right, Tyson-Paul fight, was it fixed? Both said yes, obviously, absolutely. I said, okay, how was it fixed? And Mr. Davies goes, Jake Paul really held back. He didn't lay out Tyson. And producer, Professor Jacob, says, what are you talking about? Tyson was the one who held back. He could have knocked that guy out. He's Mike Tyson. He could have knocked Jake Paul out easy. And then they start arguing. Like, are you kidding me? Are you crazy? So what was the outcome of the fight? For those who didn't watch, it was a decision, it was a unanimous decision that Jake Paul won, but nobody got knocked out. There wasn't all that much that happened during the fight. It was, some would say, the perfect outcome. It was the perfect outcome in that had Jake Paul got knocked out, the audience would have loved it, but Jake Paul's boxing career would have been over. I don't care that it's Mike Tyson. If a 27-year-old gets actually knocked out, concussed by a 58-year-old dude, that guy is not a serious boxer. Flip side, if Jake Paul, a 27-year-old, had knocked out Mike Tyson at 58, Jake Paul's boxing career also would have been over, and the audience would have absolutely hated it, and it would have caused all sorts of problems for professional boxing. The way it had Mike Tyson won by decision, Jake Paul's boxing career also probably would have been over. It's just you can't lose to a 58-year-old. I don't care if it's Mike Tyson. I don't care if the guy eats his opponent's ears. The guy's 58. So this was, in a way, the perfect outcome. Jake Paul walks away with $40 million and he gets to say, I beat Tyson in an official fight. Tyson walks away with $20 million. Tyson, who's famously faced financial problems, he made $300 million over the course of his boxing career, and he blew all of it, and he ended up in massive debt, and he's tried to work his way out of it. The guy almost died back in the spring, had to get a massive blood transfusion. Things are looking rough for Mike Tyson. Now he gets to walk away with $20 million, and if he bet against himself on the fight, he might have made another $50 million. We don't know what he made. In a way, it's all kind of perfect. And Tyson tweeted out after this, he said, sometimes you lose, but you really win. And it was really great. After the fight, Jake Paul comes out and he just said, give it up for Mike. He's the greatest. I've idolized him my whole life. A lot of people concluded that what happened here was Jake Paul saw that his idol, Mike Tyson, was in financial straits and figured out a way to make him $20 million and give him a good retirement, help take care of his family. and to make $40 million for himself, and to make it a kind of basically a tribute to Mike Tyson, albeit technically with a loss. This was the first sanctioned fight for Mike Tyson since 2005. Okay, it's basically the perfect narrative for everyone. It also explains Mike Tyson's rant on legacy. You remember we played it on the show last week. Mike Tyson was talking to that little girl, and she goes, "Hi there, Mr. Tyson. What do you think your legacy is going to be?" And Tyson's there before the fight. What do you talk about legacy? Well, who cares about what legacy is? Legacy is just a word that people made up for your ego. I don't care about legacy. Your legacy, you die. You die, and then people talk about your legacy after you're dead. Who cares? And he starts using naughty language and everything. And I thought, this is great. This is really a funny bit. Because he was obviously thinking, all right, I'm going to lose to Jake Paul. I don't know if it was fixed. In the sense that I don't know if they agreed Tyson was not going to do that uppercut or whatever. I don't know if it was fixed. I don't know in which way it was fixed. In a way, though, it was sort of fixed by nature. A 58-year-old versus a 27-year-old, it's just going to be a different kind of fight. It was just kind of fake. It all felt kind of fake. And it was enjoyable, and I'm glad Mike Tyson gets $20 million. And I watched. I don't mind watching that I watched it. But this does have another political tie-in, which is, this is why the UFC is so big right now. This is why President rolls up with a posse with Elon and Mike Johnson and Vivek and Tulsi. This is why they roll up at the UFC, and the UFC is where the energy is because the UFC doesn't feel fake. Professional boxing has been fake since On the Waterfront. Not all the time. There are real fights that happen. I don't think Evander Holyfield agreed to have part of his ear bitten off by Mike Tyson. But this goes all the way back to another kind of congested sounding boxer, Marlon Brando, and On the Waterfront says, "Yours, my brother, Charlie. It's gonna look out for me. You said this is not your night, kid. Not your night." The fix has been in boxing for a while. Whereas with UFC, it does feel very real. And so it is no surprise that President Trump shows up. His favorite sport, the one he keeps showing up to, is the one that's real. The way I think about it, it's like the Democrat establishment is professional boxing. At this point, the Democrat establishment is like the WWE, all right? It's all scripted. Whereas with Trump, he's kind of playing off the cuff. It's extemporaneous. It's real. It's live. It's much more exciting. If you want some nostalgia for the good old days, for the way politics used to be, okay, you vote for your Joe Bidens, you go vote for even your Kamala Harris's, whatever. But if you want to know where the excitement is, where the authenticity is, where the life is right now, you're going to be with Trump. Next week's Thanksgiving at the Daily Wire, we are getting ready for that conversation with those family members because, I am the conservative uncle. I'm the guy that they all talk about. Get the facts that'll leave your liberal relatives speechless. Thank you. With your new annual membership, you'll get uncensored, ad-free access to daily shows from the most trusted voices in conservative media. When dinner hits a meltdown, gather everyone around to watch Am I Racist, the #1 documentary of the decade. Don't just survive Thanksgiving, dominate it. Go to dailywire.com/subscribe today. And you can also watch my Yes or No game with Tim Pool. The average 4B woman oath will last as long as Tim's cancellation of IRL. Wow.
To be fair, it was never an actual cancellation.
It wasn't a full-on, it was a raising the prospect of canceling.
Yeah.
But for the 4B women, these women are just sad and angry about other stuff.
That's one way to put it. I'd say histrionic.
Yeah. Go check out my Yes or No with Tim Pool. My favorite comment yesterday from Mick Moose 7 is Michael has added because to my vocabulary. People have pointed this out, that I say because in a way that is different. Some people, what do other people say? They say because. Because. I say because. I guess because I'm from New York. And I managed, as a young boy in acting school, in elocution class, I was able to extirpate all of the New York accent, whatever little bit I had from my speech. I got rid of horrible. I got rid of Florida. I meant horrible, Florida. I was able to do all, except for 2 words, because and coffee. Those are the 2, you can't get them out. You take the boy out of New York, you cannot take New York out of the boy. One last point I'll make on the Tyson-Jake Paul fight. I don't care if it was fixed by nature or if whatever it was. I do like, the reason I liked 90% of Mike Tyson's point on, get about legacy, there is a parallel to Trump, even with what Tyson was doing, which is this guy is not afraid to lose. He doesn't want to lose, I think. He doesn't go out there with the intent to lose, but he's not afraid. He's not so precious about his legacy that he's going to avoid a fight. He is the man in the ring. He is the man in the arena. That is really beautiful. Trump is one of the biggest winners of the last century. He's a winner. That guy wins. But he's also one of the biggest losers. And it doesn't matter. You don't really remember the losses. You remember the wins. His vodka didn't work. His airline didn't work. His this didn't work. He went bankrupt. Who cares? He was not able to be president after 2020. Who cares? The guy is just indefatigable. He doesn't worry about embarrassing himself through loss. He's so dead set on winning. He's willing to risk losing. And that's how I feel about Tyson. Assuming the fight wasn't completely fixed for Tyson to take a dive or something like that, I don't think that's exactly what it was. Who knows? People are all sort of speculating. But regardless, Tyson gets in there at 58 years old. There is something beautiful about that. Saying, yeah, I haven't been in my top form in 20 years, more than 20 years, but I don't care. I'm going to go there and fight. I'm not precious about that last image people see of me. I'm going to go down swinging. As long as there's life in me, I'm going to be swinging. And it gives people a chance to see the great Mike Tyson fight again. There's a very similar parallel right there. However, I think the bigger parallel is actually the opposite, is that boxing, the old sort of fixed scripted sports, all right, that's how politics used to be. It's the uniparty. That's the Democrats and the squish Republicans, and they all play by the old rules. Trump is inventing the new rules. Now, speaking of fights, a pedophile has broken a woman's rib in a Canadian prison. A man who is a pedophile, who is convicted of being a pedo, identifies as a woman now, and so he was sent to a woman's prison. This is in British Columbia. This guy's Adam Labukan, youngest dangerous offender in Canada. He was given an indeterminate sentence after convicted. This is a little viewer discretion advised for the next 10 seconds. He raped a 3-month-old. Okay, this is as horrifying a person as there is on earth. It's this guy. Then he also started to identify as transgender. He changed his name to Tara. That was convenient. And around that time, he was transferred into Fraser Valley Institution for Women in Abbotsford, which has a unit for mothers and infants. This guy, this is according to a report from Redux, has been observed leering at and making aggressive comments toward the children at the FVI mother-child unit. So this guy, who is not only a pedophile, which is basically the worst kind of criminal you can be, but he's like the worst kind of pedophile, the worst kind of criminal you can be. He, it would appear opportunistically, starts to identify as a woman, gets transferred to a place with little kids at it, and then starts making aggressive, hideous comments at the kids. And so a woman at the prison goes up and calls him a pedo and tells him to stop it. And he viciously beats her and breaks one of her ribs. And then guess what happened? Guess who got punished? You know the answer before I even give the punchline. The woman. Of course, the woman got punished because she called him a pedo and she didn't respect his pronouns. The parole board, in this case, made all sorts of excuses for this guy. In fact, they blamed his Indian heritage, his First Nations indigenous heritage. The board said, the board found that you have experienced negative intergenerational effects as a result of your Indian heritage and acknowledged the linkage between your involvement in the criminal justice system, you're committing crime, and a number of elements in social and family history, including your substance abuse issues. So they say you're an addict and a pedophile and a criminal because you're Indian. What else could we expect of you? If you were a white guy, we'd expect so much more of you. But we, the parole board, recognize if you're a Native American or a First Nations Canadian, you're almost certainly going to be a drunken pedophile convict. I have one question for this horrific story. Who benefits from the false mercy shown to any of the supposed victim groups here? The First Nations, Indians, the alcoholics or drug addicts and the pedophiles. Who, especially, and the trans, of course, the trans identity. Who benefits from this kind of false mercy that says, hey, become even more entrenched in your sin and your vice and your crimes that harm other people but also harm you? Who benefits from this? Who benefits from letting this pedo go to the mother-child unit at a woman's prison so he can leer at kids and break a woman's rib? Who benefits? The trans community? The First Nations Indian? Who benefits? No one. No one benefits from this stuff. You know, there's a debate going on now over the Democrats, within the Democrats, on trans inclusion in sports. There was a debate here. Nancy Mace was arguing with Aaron Reed. Aaron Reed, I don't know what his real name is, but he's a man who identifies as a woman. Mr. Reed says there's a push among some organizations, moderate legislators, and even trans people to give up the sports issue in hopes it'll stop the hate. I have watched moderates try this in 23 state houses and blah, blah, blah. You can't give up the fight. Nancy Mace, Republican woman, says this is yet another biological male. I hate that phrase. It's not as though there were you could be biologically male and spiritually female. No. It is just men and women. Keep it simple. You don't. The minute you say biological male, you're giving up the argument to the left because you're pretending that you could be, or you're implying that you could be biologically one way but spiritually another way. And in any case, she goes, this is yet another biological male attempting to dismantle the rights of real women. I worked hard to break glass ceilings. I'll never allow the achievements of women to be taken away. And Mr. Reed says, the good news, Congresswoman, is that we've played this tired game again and again in this country. Let me skip to the end for you. Hate never wins. Hate never wins. We need to let the pedophiles go to the women's prison to leer at the children and break the women's ribs because hate never wins. Okay. There's now a trans-identifying member of Congress. And his name's Tim McBride. He goes by the name Sarah. And there's going to be a big question. Does Tim get to use the women's bathroom or does he have to use the men's bathroom because he's a man? And the House GOP is going to try to avoid this issue and sweep it under the rug. Don't let them sweep it under the rug. One, because it's the right thing to do. Women deserve to have their own bathrooms, especially if the Republicans are in charge. But two, this is a winning issue for Republicans. They say, you know, they want to have this sports debate, female or trans-identified inclusion in female sports. The Democrats don't want to give up on this issue. Great. I hope the left never gives up on this issue. I want the left to run on men and women's sports in every single election. I want it to be in every single campaign ad. I want them to bring it up at every single debate. It sounds great to me. Let's see how it turns out for them. Speaking of men and women, there's a big story, a really, really important social story that I really want to get to. I mentioned it to you at the top of the show. And it's that grandparents are moving to raise their grandchildren because their yuppie kids are working in southern suburbs. And so the grandparents are moving and they're taking on a lot of child rearing responsibilities. This has so much political import and no one's talking about the underlying issue. And I'm not going to talk about it today either because we've run out of time. So that's my little tease. You'll have to come back for that tomorrow. Today is Music Monday. The rest of the show continues now. You do not want to miss it. Become a member. Use code Knowles, KNWLES at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans.